Welcome back to the Technicamp series on GameMaker Studio 2. In the last video we created a room. A room acts like a level in GameMaker. We added to our room a load of objects, starting drawing out the first level. In this session we will be actually adding some code. I'm going to close the level editor and go back to my workspace. Car object is open at the moment, don't need that just yet. Let's close that. Let's start with giving the player character some movement. So over in the assets browser, I'm going to look and find the player character object and open that. And we can begin. GameMaker is an event-driven engine. What that means is that every time a certain thing happens, that triggers an event. And first thing you see when you open up an object is this events window here. If it doesn't pop up for you, you can click events down here. But you should see a window like that. If you go ahead and click Add Event, you'll see that there are lots of events available. You've got the Create event, you've got the Destroy event, you've got the Step event, the Gesture event, the Collision event, and so on. Events get triggered when certain things happen. So if we're going to be adding code to our player, such that when the player presses the right key on the keyboard, well, we need to think of what event will be triggered then. If a user is pressing the right key, well, that's going to be a key pressed event. So I'm going to click Add Event and look at key pressed. This is user pressing a key. We've got options. We've got pressing left, right, up, and down. These are the arrow keys. Control, space, enter. You could have anything on the keypad, any of the numbers, any of the letters. You could even have function keys, or page up, page down, so on. I'm going to start with right. As soon as I've added the key press right event, it's opened up the code window. Remember that we chose the GML language rather than drag and drop. In this window, I'll be adding some code to get the player to move right. Now, the first things we need to think about are kind of a very essential part of GameMaker, and that is built-in variables. Recall that a variable is a box that stores some value. Now, GameMaker has a load of these that are built in. That means that they are always present in the engine, and a lot of them are also present for each object. And an example of a built-in variable is the direction variable. So, what I'm going to do is in the code window, I'm going to press enter a couple of times to give myself space. You can ignore the green text on lines 1 and 2 for now. But here I'm going to start typing out direction. Direction. Now, as I was typing out, that you should see that this sub window has popped up. This is GameMaker trying to guess what you're writing. And we can see here we've got a built-in variable called direction. Direction is a variable that handles which way an object will go next. And it takes a value of degrees. So they could go 180 degrees, they could go 270 degrees, they could go 45 degrees, anything like that. The direction I want to go for right is 0. Because GameMaker counts direction weird. Right is 0, north is 90, left is 180, and down is 270. So if I want my player to go right, I need to set the direction to be 0. Now, GameMaker language is a JavaScript-based language. And it's got a couple of rules that is very much like JavaScript. One of them is that commands like this, where I'm setting direction equal to, i.e. becoming equal to 0, this kind of thing ends with a semicolon. Now, it's not essential to add that semicolon in GML, but it gives you good practice for the rest of the programming world. Other languages like JavaScript, Java, and C will use that semicolon. So even though it's not essential, it's a good idea to include it to get into the right habits. What we've done here is we've written our first line of code. We have set the direction of the object equal to 0. That means that the next direction that the object will move in is right. However, our object's not going to move at all. And the reason why is we haven't told it what speed it should move. So, to do that, we're going to update another built-in variable. This one is speed. And as you can see, as I typed out speed, it shows me all the components of GameMaker that are, well, have speed in the name. So we've got things like H speed, image speed, path speed, room speed. Those are all extra ones. The only one we want is the speed on its own. This is the speed of the object. We can set it to a number, so we can say speed is now equal to, so equals, and choose a sensible number. So I might say 7. Let's go at 7 speed. And again, you don't need to add the semicolon, but I recommend you do to get into the right habit. Direction equals 0, speed equals 7. Okay, with that written, I should probably save my project. I can see that it's currently unsaved at the moment because there's a little asterisk in the code window, and there's a little asterisk in the top of the window title. That means there are unsaved changes. So I'm going to just file, save project. There we are, all nicely saved. Okay, if I wanted to, I could close the code window. And there's my object. My object now has an event, and that event is when the key pressed is the right key. Well, then we'll run this piece of code here. So let's play the game and see if it works. I'm going to click run. It's over on the other window, so let me drag that across. Here is our player. Let's press the right key on the keyboard to see what happens. Oh, and there our player goes, off the screen and into oblivion. Okay, so a couple of takeaways from that. First of all, when I press the right key and let go of it, the player didn't stop. That could be useful if you're trying to make a game like Pac-Man, but in our game I want it so that when you let go of the right key, the player stops moving. So let's go ahead and add that. Let's add an event that triggers when we let go of the right key. So add event. I'm not going to use key pressed because that's the key going down. I'm going to use key up. That's the key being released. So when the key goes up and it's the right key, I need to do something. So this has opened up the code window for key up and the right key. And here I can do any bit of code for what happens when I want the player to slow down. So, easiest and cheapest way is to do speed equals 0, semicolon. All that does is it sets the speed of the player to be 0, and the player will come to an instant stop. You can get fancy and you can do slowing down and deceleration, all that, but that's extra stuff. All we want to do today is the bare basics. Speed equals 0. Let's give this a test. Well, let's save the game first of all. File, save project. But yeah, let's give this a test now. Bring in the game window. Okay, when I press right, the player goes right. When I let go of right, the player stops. Try that again. When I press right, the player goes right. When I let go, they stop. None of the other arrows work yet. That's because we've not programmed them. Let's go ahead and do that now. And then, after we've done that, we'll look at the problem of going straight through the walls. Okay. To do the other ones, basically all we have to do is copy key press right and key up right, but changing the direction for each different direction we want to go in. So let's do going up. Well, I'm going to right click on our key press right event. I'm going to duplicate that. When you duplicate an event, it asks you to choose a new event, the one that you want to duplicate the code into. Well, let's do key pressed up. Key press up. Well, what do I want? Well, direction up, I believe, is 90. Let's do letting go of that. So let's do the key up right this time. Duplicate that. Change that to key up. Up. Very confusing name. I don't need to change any code because it's still setting that to 0. So key up is done. Key press up is done. Key up right is done. Key press right is done. Okay, let's do key left now. Key pressed left. That direction is 180. Let's do key up left. Duplicate event. Key up left. Speed 0. Doesn't need to change. Finally, let's do key press down. Key pressed down. That direction is 270. And then let's do key up, down. Very confusing, but key up, down. Speed 0 needs no changes. Okay, let's click File, let's click Save, and run the game. Okay, when I move right and let go, they stop. When I move down and let go, they stop. When I move left and let go, they stop. When I move up, they left go and stop. I now have full control over my player. Okay, let's fix the next problem in that the player can go straight through the walls. Remember in the very first introductory video, I made a plan for this game. Part of the plan was listing all the behaviors the objects should have, and one of the behaviors of the player was to collide with the walls and not go through them. So we need another event that's all to do with collision. If we look in our player object and click add event, we can see that there is a collision event down in this menu. This event gets triggered every time a collision happens with a certain object. So in collision, I'm going to select objects, then I'm going to select the house object. That's the thing that we want to act as our walls or obstacles. So I've now added a collision with the house object. And what this means is if I add some code in here, this code will be triggered every time the player hits the house. So what do we want to happen? Well, we don't want the player to go through the house. Nice simple way of stopping that is setting the player's speed to equal to 0 again. So as soon as the player touches the house, their speed is now 0. They can't go through it. They can't advance into it any further. So file, save. Collision with house, speed equals 0. Let's click play and see how that works. Okay, let's go right. I can't go through the houses now. I'm trapped. Yeah, there's no way I'm ghosting through walls anymore. Okay, so that's problem fixed. Let's add the goal of the game now. Let's add the goal of the game to be that the player, when they hit the shop, goes to the next level. So let's click Add Event. We're going to have another collision this time. When they collide with the shop object, what do we want to do? Well, if we want to go to the next level, we probably need to use a function. Now, functions are sort of little bundles of code you can call on that will do something for you. And GameMaker has a load of these built-in functions. And one of the functions we can use is room underscore go to underscore next. And as you see, as I was typing it out, it showed it in the code window. Any function ends with an open bracket and a close bracket. And of course, this is the end of a sort of a JavaScript sentence or a GML sentence, so we'll finish it off with a semicolon. Room, go to, next. And this code, all it does is it loads up the next room or the next level. I've added this in the collision with a shop object for the player character. So when the player character hits the shop, we should go to the next level. Let's file, save. Let's... Oh, I was going to say let's test it, but there's a small problem. We don't actually have a shop in the level. So I'm going to go to the level, double click in the room section over on the assets browser, and here I can add a shop into the level. So I've done this before in a previous video, but just as a recap, find the object in the asset browser, drag it in. Oh, that's a little bit small. Remember, I could resize it here, or I could resize the sprite. But just for laziness sakes, I'm going to resize it here. But there's now a shop in the level. Let's test it. Okay, let's get this up. Let's navigate to the shop. Oh, you can see it's gone all blurry. That's one problem with resizing things in the editor. There's another problem. I can't actually get through this gap. And this is why testing your game is so important, because you might find small little bugs like this. So what I think is the problem is that the player is 128 pixels wide. These blocks are also 128 pixels wide. That doesn't give me much leeway for getting through there. In fact, I've got a margin of 0 pixels. So for now, just to keep things simple, we can make the player smaller. If I were doing this in a more advanced capacity, there are alternatives to making the player smaller. But for now, making the player smaller is going to be an easier option. So I'm going to go to my player sprite, player character. Let's resize that down to, let's say, 96 by 96 pixels. That's a bit smaller. There we are. And now when I click play, wait for it to build. There we are, it's loaded. The player is smaller, should be able to fit through that gap, hopefully. Yeah, I can fit through now. What happens when I hit the shop? Oh dear, we get an error. So, here's one type of error that might turn up. It's important to be able to decipher these kind of errors and read what it actually says. So it says there's an error in... Well, it says the event shop object, but also the player character object. So those first 4 lines aren't too useful to me. But then the next line tells me what the actual problem is. Moving to next room after the last room. What that means is there is no level 2. I'm trying to go to level 2 when it doesn't exist. That's impossible. After that line, it tells me where the error was. So it was in my player character object, it was in the collision event, and the collision with the shop object. And the line of code that caused it was room go to next. So that is one problem there. Now, there are a couple of ways I could solve that. I could create a level 2, or I could get it to check whether there is a level next before going to it. But these are all more advanced steps that you might need to explore on your own, as we've got more things to do in this demonstration. What we need to do in this demonstration next is get the cars moving up and down. So I am finished with the player character for now. So I'm going to click close player character. I don't need the player character sprite anymore. What I do need is car up object. Let's start with the car going up. And here we are. Now, to get the car moving, I can do the exact same thing I did with the player character. I could set the direction, then set the speed. But the question is what event to do it in. I don't want to do it on a key press event, because that would mean the player can control the cars, which would be a little bit weird. Instead, I'm going to do this on a create event. The create event, if I do add event create, gets triggered when an object is first created. So an object is first created when the room first loads. So on create, what do I want to do? Well, I want to set the direction to up, so direction equals 90, semicolon. I also want to set the speed. So I can set speed equals, and I could put a number in here. However, if the cars move at the same speed, maybe that might be a bit of a boring game. Maybe I want to make things a little bit more difficult or more interesting. Maybe I decide I want a random speed. So to get a random speed, I can use another built-in function. And I'm going to just start typing out what I think the function might be called, and we'll see if the code window tells me the built-in functions, see if I'm guessing along the right lines. So random. Oh yeah, there's a couple of ones that to do with random. There's random x, random get seed, random underscore range. I think random range is probably the one I want, because it had 2 numbers after it. And that's kind of makes sense. If I'm doing a random range, I kind of need to give it the numbers that it needs to go between. So I'm saying speed equals random range 1 for the lower number, comma, to show I'm going to the next number, and let's say the upper limit is 5. And of course, the whole thing ends with a semicolon. So now I'm setting the speed to be a random number between 1 and 5. And that will give our game a little bit more flair, a little bit more interest than just having the cars go at a default speed. Okay. Let's click File Save before going on to the next event. I said that I wanted the cars to go up indefinitely, so they just go up the screen and then up the screen and then up the screen and up the screen again and again and again. A nice way I could do that is have it so that when they leave the room, they return to their start position. So let's click Add Event. Now in here we've got some options. Well, let's pick one that might be triggered when we leave the room. And the one you're looking for is over in Other. And the Other menu we've got things like Outside Room, Intersect Boundary, Game Start, Game End, Path Ended, all sorts. Let's see if Outside Room works. This Outside Room event, what I think will happen is it'll be triggered when the object is outside the room. Now, if we want to set the object to return to where it started, I need to work on its position. I need to reset its position. And the position of any object in MakeCode Arcade is stored in two built-in variables, the X variable and the Y variable. The X variable is the X position of the object, so how far left or right. The Y position is how far up or down. So if I wanted to reset the position of the car to be where it started, well, I need to set X to be equal to something. How do I find out the position of where it started? Tricky. Fortunately, though, there's a built-in variable for that. There's a built-in variable called xStart that gets stored when the game starts. It stores the starting position of an object. The xStart variable is the starting X position of the object in question. So when I say X equals xStart, what I'm saying is update your position to now become your starting position. That's X. Let's try that again with Y. Y equals Y start. We also set the Y position to be the starting Y position. And what this will do is hopefully it'll have the effect of resetting the position of the car as soon as it leaves the room. Let's click Save or File Save, either one, and play and see if that works. Okay, so we've got cars going up the screen, and as soon as they leave the screen, they jump back to where they started. The car goes up. You can tell by the different distances apart that they are choosing a random speed every time. Oh, in fact, they're actually overlapping each other there, so that's a bug we could fix if we wanted to look at more advanced stuff. But for now, getting a little bit of movement, pretty cool. They don't actually do anything, the cars. We can fix that by adding a simple collision event to the player, so that when the player collides with the car, it either knocks off some health, or resets the game, or shows a "you lose" message, anything we wanted like that. Okay, let's just get the down cars working. Just as a recap of what we've done here. So I'm going to open up the down car object editor. I'm going to add event, create. When we create the car, we want to set the direction equals down. Well, down is 270 degrees. So 270 semicolon. We want the speed to be a random number or between the range 1 and 5 semicolon. Let's add an outside room event. Outside room. What do we want to do? We want to set the X position equals the X starting position. I want to say Y equals the Y start. And, well, let's, just for the purposes of demonstration, let's make a little mistake here, actually. Let's say Y equals nothing. Yeah, if I've forgotten a number somewhere, you might get an error like this. But if I'm not paying attention to that, and I click run anyway, something interesting will happen. Okay, so down the bottom in the output, I can see I've been given this message. Failed, run program complete. What this means is it's failed to run the program. And then it says underneath, for the details of why this build failed, please review the whole log above and see your compile errors window. While the log is quite long and quite full of gubbins, it does say error here somewhere. But what's most interesting is the compile errors tab. And this lists all the errors that happen when you're compiling the game. So this is where you'll find lots of your coding mistakes. So in object car down, the outside room event at line 5, it says there's unexpected symbol. So that's part of the problem. But the major problem here is malformed assignment statement. An assignment statement is any statement with equals in. It's where you're resetting the value of one variable to be something else. You're assigning that variable a value. Well, it's malformed, which means we've made a mistake in that. And yeah, I had y equals nothing. Well, let's change that back to y equals y start. Click play. Wait for it to build. Builds with no errors. And now, we've got cars moving down. And yeah, they're choosing a random speed most of the time. Okay, that is it for this very brief demo game. There is a lot of improvements to be made here. Things like actually colliding with the cars to make them dangerous. There is possibility for smoother, more satisfying movement with the character, but that's a more advanced step. Hopefully this video tutorial series has given you a nice leg up with the software and gives you opportunities to explore more. In any case, that's been me. I'm Jack from Technocamps. Hope that has been helpful in your journey with GameMaker Studio 2. And good luck with it. Cheerio.